So, Mom, tell me what little Winnie Marie Winkler was like in high school.
Well, I loved high school, and I was involved in everything from my freshman year on. And I was a student body officer and rally and Bible club and drama club, and I just loved high school, and I had lots of fun, lots of friends.
What were you like, Dad?
Well, high school for me was a little different in the beginning years than it was, like the second and third year. The first year, well, I would say the first 2 years, was primarily, I looked at school almost like another part of my job. Because, I lived on a farm and there was a lot of work to do. So I'd get up early, get the chores done, and then off to school, get the school over with, to get back to the chores after school. So my life was different than Winnie's in high school, especially the first 2 years. So that was kind of my life in the first 2 years of high school.
Tell me about Sweet Home. It was, what kind of town at that time?
Well, when we grew up there, it was what everybody called a lumber industry town. I mean, everything revolved around the lumber industry, whether it was, a logging outfit or a lumber mill.
Mm-hmm.
Mom, what was your favorite part of school? What did you enjoy doing the most?
Well, I suppose I'm mostly all about social things. Of course, I always liked to get good grades and everything, and did all that. But I always liked being involved in a lot of things and having a lot of friends and always stuff to do and planning things like that. So I guess that's it.
Dad, what was, you worked quite a bit during that time, but what are the fun things you remember about, getting into high school and you're moving along your freshman, sophomore year there? What do you remember?
Well, it was, to me, it was basically getting into high school, getting a diploma, and moving on with life. In the first 2 years, I had so many other responsibilities that I had some goals that I had set, and one of them was getting through high school, and that's basically kind of what I was like. I was getting through high school.
At what point did you, used to tell me that you used to do a little bit of boxing? Was that later or earlier?
No, I did a little boxing in high school. They call it the high school smoker, where somebody would challenge somebody else to fight in the smoker. And so I done that. But I did not participate in sports in high school. It was not something my dad wanted me to do. There was too much work to do on the farm.
What kind of farm?
Well, we raised chickens, pigs, cows, you name it, we raised it. And, there's always a lot of work to do on the farm.
What grade were you in when you guys met?
We were sophomores. It was Christmas break of our sophomore. I mean, I knew who he was, and I think he knew me, but to really meet was probably Christmas break of our sophomore year.
Dad, prior to meeting Mom, did you know who she was or have any thoughts about her?
Yeah, everybody knew who Winnie was. She was the social chairman of everything that happened in high school, especially in our grade of school. So yeah, everybody knew who Winnie was. So.
We met on a ski trip to Hoodoo that I and another guy had planned.
Who
Steve
that?
Maley and I had planned this, and we were all going to be couples, and so I was going to be with Steve, and then so we were like trying to pair everybody up. Well, my cousin was staying with us, and so she needed a date. So he says, "Well, I'll ask Ken Robertson, good buddy of mine." And I said, "Oh yeah, I know Ken," and so we had Ken come, and And before the day was over, it was a great day, and we had tons of fun. But I met Ken, and on that ski trip, and I thought he was way cute. And so we just kind of connected there. Didn't, say a whole lot, just visited on the back of the bus on the way home. But anyway, it kind of was a connection. And so that's where we first, had our first connection. So.
Dad, what was your thoughts on the ski trip there?
Well, I was blind dated with her cousin, and really it was within the first few minutes that I wasn't too happy with the hookup. So, and then Winnie and I started talking, and my interest changed from her cousin to her. And so, unbeknownst to my best friend, Steve Maley, I started moving in his territory. And so that was a real connection at that point.
So, how many days was it after the ski trip that you went back to school? Because it was, you said, Christmas break, so.
Yeah, it was Christmas break, and then, say the 2nd of January, we went back to school after Christmas break.
So between the ski trip and the school was really the next time you saw Ken?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, Dad, can you tell me about seeing Mom at school?
Well, I think it was in the first few days after we went back to school that I came out of the band room, and I was headed back into the main hallway, and I met Winnie face to face. She was walking between classes, and greeted her, and I guess I made a comment that we both haven't forgot. I looked at her sweater and I said, "What a great looking sweater you've got on. I just love that sweater." And she thanked me, and we had a few more kind words, and she went her direction, I went mine. But from there, I had made my mind that Winnie and I was going to begin dating.
What was your thoughts, Mom, when Dad came up to you? And
It's funny how we remember that minute, because it was kind of like the time that we really met each other, even though the ski trip we had. But when he said, "I really like that sweater," I go, "Oh, geez." And so, it was just a brief thing. It was between classes. But of course, then I went to my girlfriends and said, "Oh, I hope Ken Robertson asks me out." And anyway, then a couple days later, I was asking someone, another guy, his friend, and I says, "Do you think he's going to ask me out?" And anyway, he said he's thinking about it, and so it was just a short time till he did.
Well, I guess you'd almost call it a partial date, because we met at the high school football game that evening and sat together, and then after the game, I don't remember if we went to a dance after the game or we just, I walked her home, I remember that. I walked her home, and then I walked 3 miles home. But that was a beginning. Now that's in the first part of January. And the 20th of January, I figured on having my own transportation, so.
Because that was his birthday.
Yep.
And he would be 16, get his license, get his car.
Well, and so then it was not unusual for my dad to let me use the car, even though I wasn't 16 yet and didn't have a driver's license. I had driven quite a bit. I'd driven a lot, and a lot of it was by myself without a license. I even got caught once. But anyway, I told him that I'd like to use a car because I wanted to take this girl out. So he let me take the car. So I'm driving all over. We're driving Dad's brand new DeSoto. We're driving all over town, and I pull into the Skyline to make a U-turn and didn't see the ditch and drove headfirst right into a ditch. So her first date was me. We didn't wear they didn't have seatbelts in those days. She landed on the dash of the car.
Slipped down in.
And I had to find a friend to bring his pickup out and pull us out of the ditch. But you got to realize that was highly embarrassing because that was a turnaround for all the high school kids. And so everybody was tooting their horn laughing at us, and we were standing out there trying to get the car out of the ditch. So that was an eventful first date.
We had a great time. I was glad he asked me out, but when the car went in that ditch, and actually I kind of landed down, I slid off. It just knocked me off the seat. The seats were really big. Remember, it was a bench seat,
Yeah.
and kind of cracked my head there. But actually, we laughed about it, and it was fun. But yeah, we had a great time.
It's one of those things you remember for.
Yeah. Especially him, because he was so embarrassed. Those days, you got to wear a ring, and so he'd give me a ring. God, I don't even remember what it was.
Well, when you start, in those days when you went with a girl, you found a ring. Well, I never wore rings, but I knew I had to get one because now I'm going with a girl. Even though I dated other girls, I wasn't considered going with them. So now I'm going with Winnie. So I had to get a ring. So I found somewhere, I don't remember where I got the ring, but you get a ring that's big enough for your finger, it's way too big for her finger. So what they did is they went underneath the ring and they wrapped tape around it.
Yes,
So when you turn your hand over, it's a big ball of tape here so they could wear your ring. But at least people know in school that leave her alone, there's a guy somewhere.
Well, while we were dating, there were two other couples that were our best friends, and that was Steve and Trudy and Stephen Marlis, and so like the six of us did almost everything together. And then the boys would go out, a lot of times just the boys, have a boys' night out, and us girls would all get together, and we'd spend the whole night trying to find the boys, and we just had a great time. We were both involved in things, and I was mostly that year, and then by our junior year, Ken was. Well, we started dating when we were sophomores, and then by our junior year, we were both class officers and involved in everything, and went to our, proms, and probably our junior year, around our prom time, I got pregnant. And there we go.
So how did you tell Dad?
Oh, I hardly remember how I told him, probably that I was late. And big disaster.
I can remember that day really
You
well,
can?
too, yes.
Okay,
I really
well, then
can.
you tell me.
Tell me about it, Dad.
Well, I have to back up just a little bit to kind of bring you to this point. You see, after we met and had the first couple dates in Dad's car, the huge event for me was getting my license, and because of all the work that I'd done for years, I'd saved up enough money to buy a car. So 16th birthday, get my license in the morning, get the car in the afternoon, freedom. And I kind of had an agreement with Dad that, okay, I'll do all my chores morning and night, but by 7 o'clock at night, I'm done, so I can go out on dates and I can have some freedom. So that gave us that freedom to, having my own car. And so we started spending more time together because now I'm pretty mobile. And so now we've gone on to the junior year, and we spent a lot of time together. We're crazy about each other. And so this event happened. But she had mentioned earlier about the boys' night out and the girls' nights out. We would, every once in a while, we would go with the guys and she'd go with the girls. Anyway, one night I was chasing around with the guys, and I run my car over a bank and smashed it up. So I was in the hospital, and with broken ribs and no teeth and all that kind of stuff. And during that time is when Winnie came into the hospital and said, I think we might be going to have a child.
I forgot.
Yeah, it was kind of a shock, but those things happen.
So that's what, after Christmas time, your junior year? That's right. That's like.
No, that was, are you asking when?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that was like in May, probably the end of May, because I had just.
Going into your junior year then?
No, going into our senior
Senior
year.
year.
Oh,
Going into our senior
okay.
year.
School was just out, junior
Yeah,
year.
yeah. And
So you were still in summertime then?
yeah, so and the reason
When-
I
when you
remember,
found out.
remember I was on the Sportsman's Holiday Court for the summer. And so I had to go through all that knowing that I was pregnant. And it took me quite a while to get up nerve to tell my mom that I was hoping it wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about telling your mom.
Why? Does it do that?
I figured that one was coming.
Isn't that
Where
stupid?
were you guys? Where were you
No,
guys living?
you're right.
Where were you guys living at the time?
Long Street. Yeah, well, I had to tell my mom. And anyway, I was on the Sportsman's Holiday Court, and we had a lot of activities and things that we were doing as part of being on a court. And then I also was working at the cannery. And so, oh man, I got to tell McKinney. He kept asking me if I had told my mom, and I hadn't. And you know, I was pretty pretty upset about this because, you know, had everything, and hated to tell my mom who worked at the school, and she was always so proud of me and stuff. But anyway, I finally told mom, and you know what? She was great. She was great. And you know, after I became a parent, I realized how hard that was for her at that time to hear that. But she was great, and we just went right ahead and made plans to get married. And so, you know, it went on. It wasn't easy. We went on.
So you both find out that you're officially pregnant, and what was there? Was there any kind of discussion or proposal or anything like that at that point? Just curious.
Well, you know, I can remember telling my dad, you know, there's certain events in a person's life when they can remember it almost word for word, and the instant you do something, that you remember that. I had went up to Salem and loaded up a load of feed, brought it into the Lebanon feed store. Dad and I was unloading it. And Dad said, well, I think you need to start thinking about college. And, you know, I give him a few seconds after he said that, and I said, Dad, I'm not planning on going to college. I've never been interested in college. Oh, he said, I think you need to go. And I said, well, instead of college, I think I'm going to get married. And Dad said, don't be foolish, don't be foolish. I said, no, Dad, I'm going to get married probably in the next 30 days. And I remember him kind of dropping the feed cart right there. So that's kind of through that. And so in our conversation between us, there was nothing that we ever talked about any different than getting married. No. Sure, we were a little young, but at those years, there was a lot of kids that got married right out of high school. So we were a year early, and we just made plans and said, this is how we think we can do all this, and we just put it together and we did it. We got married, and that's the way it was. Period. Well, you know, I think that I think it was much harder on Winnie than me. She's the one that was carrying the child. She's the one that physically showed, so it was much harder on her than me, I think. So my job was to be a support rather than any conversation of doing anything but getting married.
How soon did you get married then? From you found
Well-
out and then you got married?
Yeah, I don't exactly remember that this is why we planned the date, but we got married September 3rd. And so that was like right after Labor Day, and so it was just before school started. And just had just a small wedding, and we were both 17 at that time.
So did that cause any difficulties of getting married?
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, we didn't know it,
We
but there
didn't
was.
know. And so my mom and Kenny's mom and Kenny and I went to Albany to the courthouse to get our marriage license. And we'd already, set up the wedding in Sweet Home. And so we went over to get our license, and we go in there, and only to find out that at that time, even though we had our parents with us and their signature, you couldn't get married in Oregon. And
At
we go
17.
at 17. We go, what? They said, no, sorry. And the lady at the office kept trying to get Kenny to say he was 18. But he didn't want to say he was 18 because the draft was on. And if he said he was 18, I mean, that probably wouldn't have happened. But anyway, so do you want me to tell you what?
Yeah.
So then she told us about this place in Washington where we could go and talk to a judge, and that he would waive the period. So we went home. The next day, the four of us again, two moms, Kenny and I, we get up in the morning and we go up to Stevenson, Washington. And we meet with this old judge. You tell him what he was like. Tell him what he was like.
Well, he was a judge that was ready for retirement, probably 70, 75-year-old judge.
Kind of like Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy. And so we kind of told him our story, and he goes, well, we'll just take care of that, and not a big deal here. And he just really was a comfort to us. Basically, after going through the Albany situation, where it was highly emotional for Winnie, because everything was blowing up, a day before. And so, he got us married and got everything, all the paperwork done. And he looked at me and he says, you're getting a great bride. You just think you have done really well. And so he was really a comfort for both of us.
we both remember
We
that.
loved the guy, You don't usually find out with a judge, but this guy was incredible.
After the wedding, we left and went to California, drove down, it was our honeymoon, to see my dad. My real father, Winnie, lived in California. So we drove down to see him and spent a few days there, and we had a great time, and come back and started school as a married couple. And, we knew all our friends. I don't know that I ever really said to them that I was pregnant, but, everybody knew, and knew that, my mom wouldn't have let us get married if we weren't. But
So you started your senior year, and you're married, and did you move into a house? What did you do there, Dad?
Well, a guy by the name of Bill Bowman. We got married we got married and we lived at my mom and dad's house for a short time.
and moms.
And then we went to her mom. We shared between the two of them a little bit in the first few weeks. And then a guy by the name of Bill Bowman called and said, I built a new home in Lebanon, and I've got this home in Sweet Home that I'd like to rent to you. And I told Bill, I said, Bill, I can't afford that beautiful home, because it was a gorgeous place. He says, no, you can afford that. So we made a deal at $60 a month to rent that house. It was one of the nicest houses in Sweet Home.
Completely furnished.
And
Really
so we
nice.
moved into this gorgeous place, which blew all of our friends away. We get married, we have not a penny between us hardly, and we move into this nice house. So we got off to a good start there.
But we'd get up in the morning, and he would get up about 6 o'clock, and he'd go work at the feed store, and then come back about 8 o'clock. We'd go to school, and then at 3, as soon as school was out, he would leave and go back to work, and I would go home and do both of our homeworks. And then he would come home and we'd have dinner. And then this was our senior year. Now that sounds really ideal, but you know what? It was not easy. And I could not have done it had we not done it together. But I always think the interesting thing about our whole situation there was that not once did we ever think of not going back to school. You know, we never once thought of not getting married, and we never once thought of not going to school. Yeah. And so we both went to school together every day. And I mean, because we love school. Yeah, in those days, if you were pregnant and married, you had to drop all of your activities, your student body office, your rally, obviously, and things, because it just wasn't the rules. And but we still, you know, we walked to our classes together every day, and I really couldn't have done it without each other. And I look back now and think how resilient we were. I mean, really, it was much harder on our parents than us, you know, in a reality.
And I think, too, in school, there had not been, that we knew of, any other couple that had gone to school, married, and in the same class. Some of the teachers had a problem with this, and we had some conflicts with some of the teachers. They were a little hard on us. And but we did have some support with some of the teachers too. So it was kind of a situation where we just kind of worked our way through it, kind of not tried to be too focal in the school. We kind of stayed back. That was hard. We both had student body offices for that year. That was elected before school was out in the junior year. So we dropped everything. We were involved in a lot of different things, and we dropped everything and just stayed in to ourselves primarily.
So tell me about being in class together. Was there one particular class that you guys remember being in together?
Yeah, that would be typing class. We sat right across from each other in typing class, and we were both pretty good typists. So we competed on how many words per minute and accuracy every day. So that was our best. That was my best class. I can say one other thing about my senior year. Is my senior year with Winnie doing my homework, I got the best grades of high school.
Well, I was due with our baby in February. And, being really well known in school and stuff, of course, small school, I had a huge baby shower, and by then we had moved to another house, and we decorated the nursery and everything, and I had tons of baby stuff. And anyway, I went into labor on February 23rd, and anyway, it just didn't go well, and I ended up having to have a C-section, cesarean, and by the time he made the decision to do that, the baby anyway, I ended up having to have a C-section because so by the time he made the decision to do the C-section, there was too much pressure on the cord, and the baby had died. And so anyway, I can even remember doing homework in the hospital. I mean, I think it was just to kind of hide But it was really hard time. It was a hard time on him too, because then he had to take care of everything, the arrangements and stuff with my mom and stuff, because I was in the hospital for a week. But, you know, and then again, we still never ever thought about not going back to school.
Well, so we're at the hospital, and we're going through these day or 2 days of, she was in labor, out of labor. You know, in those days they held cesarean sections till the very last. They didn't like to do them, whereas today they do them at a drop of a hat. But in those days they didn't. So when the doctor came out and he says, I'm trying to make the decision to take the baby by cesarean or wait, you know, I'm 17-year-old. I say to him, what's cesarean? I had no idea what he was talking about. And so he explained it. You know, my attitude was, you know, we're in your hands. You decide what we need to do here. And so he waited. Probably wasn't a good decision, but that was a decision probably most doctors in those days would have made. Anyway, so we've lost the baby. We, while she's in the hospital for a week, we bury the baby over at the Alpine Cemetery. And so she did not get to go to the funeral. So weeks passed, we're back home and going on. Now see what you done to me?
So 50 years, wow. I have mascara all over me.
Oh, it looks good.
Thanks, Mark. I kept feeling like I need one of them.
So we're back from the hospital, and so we're back in the home together. We're back to school. And I think at that time, the most amazing thing to me was kids at school, teachers, they thought, well, the baby's gone, now they'll get a divorce. And we were amazed by those comments. We had no intention. We had no intention and had never talked about, well, the baby's gone, that's the end of the marriage. That was not the reason. That was the reason we got married, but that sure wasn't a reason for us to separate. Ever even considered it. So all of these things that we went through, I think made us stronger. You know, all kinds of comments. Every time somebody make a comment, we would be a little stronger. So we just really carried on. And that was tough. That was the toughest time. Probably of all this. That few weeks after she got home from the hospital was the toughest time for us.
I wouldn't have thought that. I wouldn't. I didn't. I mean, I guess I imagine there was a lot of, grieving at the loss. I mean, you had a baby room and, well, you know, what was that like for you? I mean, come back.
Well, I think, you know, it's hard at any age, but, you know, I was so vulnerable at that point, you know, just one being young and one having that shame. But you know, and then to lose the baby, and then to come home and our nursery was all fixed and everything was really hard. But we then slowly went back to school and caught up on all of our homework, and I think, you know, that kind of helped us hide from some of that pain. So.
I think I've heard it from somebody who, you know, even somebody said to you in the locker room, some guy said to you in the locker room about, you know, well, the baby's gone or something.
Yeah, it was, we was in the shower of the locker room. And, you know, I'd already heard these comments from a number of people, and this one big guy was really a smart mouth. Didn't like the guy. Him and I had had a lot of conflict. He made some wise remark in the shower one day about, well, when's the divorce? And I kind of lost control and I decked him. And I kind of hurt him. I felt pretty bad about it afterwards, but I did hurt him. But literally, when that got around school, those comments stopped. So I guess it was there's a good and a bad side to it, because the comments stopped. I never heard it again from anybody.
So you graduated together. Tell me about the end of your senior year.
Well, we are couples that we all dated together. We again then went to our senior prom together. We went to our junior prom together, the 6 of us, and we went to our senior prom together.
We went to senior skip day all day together, too.
Yes, and we went to senior skip day. We went to the coast, and we both remember that. And you know, so we just went on, and we ended up having a great time our senior year, and then graduated together, and just went on.
In those days, everyone that graduated was at the ceremony. All wore the same cape and hats.
Cap and gowns.
And so we were just part of the graduation party.
Did you walk together? Did you?
No, we didn't walk together because it,
Alphabetical.
Yeah, well, when we both were Robertson, but somehow you were with I think Sharon Richards.
It was.
Yeah, and then
I don't know why. It
Yeah.
just staggered there.
Yeah, and so
That was probably one of the teachers we had a little problem with. It probably put that together anyway, so that's fine. You know, I think, you know, in today, a lot of women will keep their maiden name and use it within their name.
hyphen it or something.
Had we given it more thought, because she loved her name, Winnie Winkler. I mean, it's a great name. And, you know, I would have had no problem with her being Winnie Winkler Robertson. And I kind of wish that's what we'd have done.
Yeah.
But, you know,
She
she wasn't that old anyway, so. You know. From February, we graduated in the end of May. We both, at that point, that was a change in our life right there. Out of high school, our life has changed now. We're out, we're both working, and we're looking into the future, making plans. So that's the start of life, basically. So we basically lived through the first year, but life began after graduation.
You were working where after graduation for the first?
Well, same place I had worked most of my life, at the farm with Dad. And those were, it got harder for me after I got out of high school and was working with more responsibility. And Dad was, you know, expecting so much more out of me at that time. And so it was, for me, it was a fairly tough year.
I was working at the school district doing some typing and things like that. And then the next summer I went to Oregon State and took business classes and drove back and forth from Sweet Home with a group of people doing summer school. And yeah, I liked being a homemaker and a wife, and I, you know, was a good cook and had taken home ec my senior year, and you know, my mom was right in the same town and visited with her all the time, and So yeah, I kind of fit right in, you know.
After high school, we were, you know, making new friends because our friends had gone off to college that we'd spent a lot of time with. So we were making new friends in Sweet Home, and most all of them were older friends that were married, people we knew that had been married longer than us by quite a bit, and so we were out one night and we all come up with this idea: let's all buy VW Bugs, because gas had gone up from 25 cents to 30 cents a gallon, so we had to save gas. So we all traded in our cars and bought these VW Bugs.
Yes, but say what you traded in.
Oh, honey, that was such a mistake. You know, I had this beautiful 57 Chevy Bel Air two-door hardtop that I traded for a Volkswagen. I'll never forgive myself for that. But anyway, we had these Bugs, and even, you know, we'd take off and run around all four of these Bugs together.
We'd follow each other
Follow
through
each
town.
other around, and people go, oh, they all had different colored Bugs. And so we had a great time with it. It was a lot of fun, but it didn't last very long because those Bugs weren't fast enough.
It was too small.
Basically, I worked right out a year, almost exactly a year for Dad. And I had a friend that I'd known for a lot of years, used to deliver feed to the family. And ironic enough, his name was Glenn Robertson. He had the same last name, but we were not related in any way. He was driving truck for a guy named Sam Tyler. And he asked me if I wanted to go with him a few times, and so I'd jump in the log truck and go with him. And he let me drive a few times. Now, I'd driven feed truck, basically. And he asked me if I wanted to drive, and so sure, I jumped in the driver's seat and drove the log truck. And I had no idea what he was thinking. And then he came to me one day and he said, I've got Sam Tyler agreed to let you take and drive this truck. I'm getting a new truck. And you got about 30 minutes to make this decision. Because he said, you got to start Monday morning. And I think that was on a Saturday. And so I'm thinking, oh my, what's Dad going to think about this? So I waited until Sunday night at 10 o'clock. I went to Dad and Mom's house. They were in bed. And I walked in their bedroom and said, Dad, I'm quitting. I'm going to go to work driving a log truck. He was probably as shocked as a couple years ago. And so I said, you know, this not working out, you and I working together, I'm just going to go drive a log truck. So Monday morning, I was driving a log truck.
Which wasn't the best thing to do because it left his dad short. He didn't have anybody because he did everything.
No, yeah, everything. But anyway, so I went to work driving a log truck. And that was in June of 1961. There was nobody else 18 years old driving a log truck. He had to get a special permit and insurance to let me drive. And so, you know, here I am out there driving a log truck with a bunch of older guys, and that was something I hadn't thought about. But anyway, well, that was one of the things that, you know, I'm 18, I'm the youngest guy out there, and so every morning, a lot of the truckers stopped at the Shamrock Cafe and drank coffee, talked about their day and what happened the day before, and so I stopped with the boys. And never thinking, I didn't drink coffee at that time, and I'd go in and sit down and order a cup of hot chocolate. So one day, a few days after this started, I walked in and one of the loudmouths of the group spoke up and says, well, there's Robertson, get the hot chocolate out. Because he was kind of one of the guys that was a little bit of a problem because of my age and driving out there. So I sat down and I ordered coffee. And that's when I started drinking coffee. I said, no more of that stuff. It was different than you think it's going to be. In those days, our roads were very, very narrow, logging roads. It was fairly dangerous. There'd been quite a few guys killed on those roads we drove on. So it was a tougher job than I anticipated. I spent a year 2 years driving truck for Sam. The guy, Glenn Robertson, had quit and gone on to another company, and so I was running 3 trucks for Sam at that time, and doing the scheduling and all kinds of stuff. So when Sam decided to go to Alaska with his brothers, he came to me and said, "I'm going to sell the trucks, and I'd like to have you take this truck. I'll make you a deal." So we ended up buying a truck. We borrowed $1,000 from Winnie's dad, and we were in business. And that was in '63.
I was excited about him purchasing a log truck because we were going to be business owners, and we had 2 children. Terry was born in '62 and Nisha in '63, and so it was a big thing to take on, but we were excited about it.
One of the things after I bought my own log truck was one of the things I seen as a need was somewhere for us guys to work on our trucks, because we all did our own repairs. I mean, we relined our brakes, we did everything. So, you know, we were laying in the mud outside the house working on these trucks. So there was a shop in Foster that McCulley Logging Company moved out of. So I looked these guys up and I asked them if I could rent their shop. So they rented it to me, and it was a big shop. So then I went out and found a bunch of truckers that wanted to rent space from me. And I enticed them into it by, we had a big diesel barrel out there. And so I did a deal where I supplied fuel to these guys. So I kind of set up another little business alongside the trucking business and made a little bit. But it was a good place for all of us to, and we ended up helping each other on our trucks, and it was really a good part of the trucking for us.
You made some money on that, too.
I made a little money on it, but you know. Anyway. And I remember my dad saying, "Well, when are we going to have some grandchildren?" And, you know, and I didn't even think Dad had even thought about those kind of things. But, you know, and so they were, I think both grandparents were anxious for us to get started. And so it was good timing.
When we had Terry,
Good timing.
everyone was excited about that because it was going to be the first grandchild. And everyone wanted to have a girl, wanted me to have a girl, I think probably because we had lost a daughter, but also except Kenny and his folks and his parents wanted a boy. And so I can remember when I had Terry, and I was crying when he was born because he was a boy. And I can remember waking up, and I was kind of crying in my sleep, and I can remember looking up and Kenny looking down and said, "But honey, he's so beautiful." And then my dad was there, my dad Winnie, and he was saying, "He's a beautiful baby, honey." And when I saw him, he was gorgeous. And so, you know, it was all fine. But, you know, you just get these things in your mind. And then, of course, when Nisha was born, I was ecstatic that she was a girl. You know, we were all excited about that. And then by the time Stacy was born, we were just happy with a boy or a girl. So.
Yeah, I can remember when Winnie was being wheeled down the corridor of the hospital to go in to have the cesarean section. You know, she was already starting to go under anesthetic. And she hollered all the way down the hallway, "I don't think I'm ready to go through with this yet." After all this, she wanted to back out.
Well, I was just scared. Well, all our kids were, Terry, Nisha, and Stacy, were all born in the same hospital and all delivered by the same doctor. And in fact, the same doctor that had delivered our first baby. And I mean, we, you know, in spite of what happened with that situation, we still loved him. And I mean, and so anyway, yeah, Terry was born in '62, and we were so excited to have our first. By then, we're planning our family, and so Terry was born in April of '62, And then Nish was born in December of '63, and so, you know, we had this, and then Kenny wanted to kind of do like 2 children and then like 10 years and do 2 more, because that's what his family had done. But my doctor didn't want me to wait that long, so then about 6 years later, we had Stacy, planned and had Stacy.
Yeah, Stacy was a real planned out child.
Meaning what?
We spent a lot of time planning on Stacy.
Yeah.
Let's just edit that. What?
Oh, I could go on that one because it's
Well, I wanted him born on my birthday,
Oh God!
and he didn't happen. He was born the next month.
I mean, I was trying to truck at the time, and she wanted me to stop at lunch hour. Gee.
Oh, come on.
So I bought this truck about September, and about 3 months, 2 to 3 months later, we had terrible weather. Snows had come in early. We were out of work. All the trucks got laid off. And here I was, truck payments, trying to support this house, and no money coming in. So I became the housewife,
Because I was working.
and Winnie was working. So we struggled through the winter, which was really a tough winter to make it through because our income went way down. We
But-
struggled through that first winter.
He babysat while I went to work.
Well, I was delivering feed to different people around Sweet Home and the area. And this older guy that I delivered feed to out in Pleasant Valley, he and I got to be really good friends. He was in his late 70s, great old guy. And he always wanted to talk for a while, and I delivered feed to him. One day he said, "I'd like you to think about buying this property from me." And he owned a whole hillside that was view property in Sweet Home. And I told him, you know, I don't have any money to buy any property. And he says, well, let's find a way for you to buy some property. So we ended up buying 2 acres of property right on a prime building spot on that hill. And then we started thinking about building a house. So, you know, it's funny how these different things happen like that. We would have probably never built a house in Sweet Home had this guy not brought up that he wanted me to have this property. I wish I'd have bought the whole 8 acres, but we bought the 2. And so then we started thinking, well, let's find a way to build a house. She just happened to have an uncle
Second
That-
cousin, yeah.
built houses, and he gave us a fabulous deal. And so we got the loan, we got him lined up, and we ended up with a home.
Where was the home located?
Pleasant Valley, right behind the school, up on the hill behind the school.
Set in our house set on really nice 2 acres, and yeah, it was really
It's
nice. It was
beautiful
like
property.
it was only 1,190 square feet, but that was big then, you know. And we had 1.5 baths. That was big. And you know, I can remember we had some friends up, and they go, "Oh, someday we hope to build a house like this." You know, and by today's standards, that's really small. I mean, condos are bigger than that. But it was nice then. It
But
was
you and I were both raised in homes that were 800, 900 square feet, total sizes. I mean, this is bigger than Mom's and Dad's house now. Bigger than my folks' house.
wasn't bigger than mine.
I was gonna say,
I was going to say, not
dear.
bigger than Long Street.
I don't.
Honey,
think-
Mom had living room, family room upstairs,
You know,
downstairs.
that was a small house.
We loved our house out there, and it was on 2 acres. And then we had got from one of the neighbors, we hauled it down on a trailer, a playhouse, a big playhouse, and it was in our backyard. And so we decorated it all up, wallpapered it, and that was Nish and Terry, and then Stacy come along, and then our neighbors had a swimming pool, and it was a great setting to raise a family. So yeah, the trucking was good to us, and even though we didn't have a lot left at the end of the year, it was good. But I didn't care for some of the things that also entailed in the trucking, which was kind of a rougher group, and also he went from hot chocolate to coffee to stopping with the truckers for beer. And my stepdad was a drinker and was an alcoholic. And it was not fun. And I always said I wouldn't live with someone that drank. And so that was a hard part of our marriage.
How was that for you, Dad? I mean,
Yeah, how was that?
Did you notice the tension happening in the home, or?
Well, yeah, it did. And, you know, on my part, you know, we're done with the day, or we're almost done with the day. And in those days, it was nothing to have a beer or two and drive. I mean, in fact, there was some guys had a beer. They were drinking beer while they drove. Now, we didn't do that with the trucks, but, you know, and a bunch of guys would say, hey, we all had CBs, so let's stop and have a beer. So, you know, we all stopped and had a beer. Again, you might consider that some peer pressure, okay? So we'd stop and have a beer. Well, one led to two led to three, and now it's 9 o'clock at night. And I more understand after that period how Winnie felt about living with her dad, her stepdad, who was an alcoholic. And so things starting to get a little tougher at home because of this. And yeah, I was feeling guilty about it, but you know, I had cut it down, but not all the way.
Well, one night we were going to have this couple over with their children, and they had children the same age as ours, Terry, Nish, and Stacy, and so I was all excited about it and had everything ready. Only Ken doesn't show up, and they're there, and we wait, and I knew where he was at. He was at the tavern. Anyway, he finally came home, and he had had too much to drink. So the evening went. They left, and after they left, I took the kids and put them in the car and said, I'm out of here. I said, I'm not going to live with somebody that drinks. And he came out to the car, and he got the 3 kids, took them back in the house, and says, you're not leaving. And I said, I'm not living like that. And so it was like an ultimatum. And so we went back in, and then we didn't talk for about 3 days. He went back to work, and he came home a few nights later, said, sold the truck back today. And so.
Well, I think to add to that a little bit, that night that she gave me an ultimatum was probably the best thing she could have done, because it didn't take me very long to figure out that she was pretty serious and that there was no way after all this that I was going to give up my family. So, and you know, it's funny how things work out. And I mentioned earlier about certain little things in life change your directions. And so I've got this on my mind. I'm thinking, okay, how are we going to get this all worked out? And Sam Tyler had, at that time, he had come back from Alaska. He was running the loader again at the company I was hauling for. And he told me, he said, come back late and I'll stay and put another load on you tonight and I'll ride home with you. So I did come back and got him, and we loaded, and he rode in with me. On the way in, he said to me, you know, he said, I guess one of the foolish things I did was sell my truck. He said, the only time I really had any money. And I said back to him, I said, I know how you can get right back in the trucking business pretty easy. And in the next hour, we had a deal cut. He owned the truck, and I was out of the trucking business.
It was a good thing. It was a good thing because he come home and said, I'm selling the truck, and we need to talk about what we're going to do and what we're going to get into business. I look back now and think You know, that was a big thing because he loved trucking. The other thing looking back on it is that I realized that he would do whatever it took, you know, to keep the marriage together. And he knew that he couldn't stay in trucking and not drink. And so he had enough foresight to know that he had to get out of it and do something else. So then that's when we decided to go into business together, you know, a business that we had both worked in together. So we started looking for something to do together. Right?
That's what we did, dear.
But that seems like a fun little phase in your life there. I mean, you sold the truck, and then you're...
That was fun.
Fun
I can
and-
remember thinking about that and trying to decide what to do.
Well, and kind of what transpired from the time that decision was made, it was about, I don't know, a few weeks later before I really turned the truck over to him.
And you still worked.
And I drove it for a while for him after that, while we were looking for
A
a business. And that, because now we are at a real turning point in our life. We're established in Sweet Home, but there wasn't many opportunities in Sweet Home in a business.
So we knew we had to get
I'd
out.
already been self-employed. I did not want to work for somebody else. I wanted to do my own business. And I think we were both committed in that spot. So while we were looking, and we looked at a lot of different things, I continued to drive, not only for Sam, but other guys that owned their own trucks asked me to drive for them. Well, they took a day or two off. So I was busier than I really wanted to be, because I was getting all kinds of calls to drive for a day here, 2 days here, a month here, whatever. And we did fine financially until we got into the business that we decided on.
What, when did you put your house for sale?
Well, that was when we had decided to buy the A&W restaurant in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
We needed money. We knew we weren't going to be living in Sweet Home, so we had to sell the house. So we needed money. We needed to move to Salem. First thing we did was put it up for sale.
You sold pretty quick.
It sold within about 3 weeks.
Yeah, sold pretty quick.
What other, just as a side note there, what other businesses did you look at besides restaurant business?
Well, one of the ones that I was really interested in and really was focused on in the beginning was a hardware store.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some people we were acquainted with in Sweet Home that owned a hardware store, and I was always kind of intrigued by that business. But it was called Western Auto, and when I got into it and looked at it in more detail, it was going to take so much money to get into it that we just couldn't make that move. Then we had another friend that owned the A&W restaurant in Sweet Home that I'd visited with, and he was really high on the A&W business. There was 2,500 stores out there. Everybody was making money. And he directed me to a broker out of Portland that he said, this guy can find you a good store. Called the guy, and he got us a good store. We made a decision to make this move into business in Salem. And that really was, for me, an exciting change. I was ready, even though we both loved Sweet Home and grew up there, I was ready to move on to the next thing. I think it was much harder on her to leave the home, the comfort zone of Sweet Home, than it was for me. And but I think, you know, it was a very important thing for us. It was a very important move for us.
Well, it was exciting because we had worked on trying to find a business, and then we bought this A&W restaurant in Salem, and my mom and I always used to go to Salem and shop. And so I was really excited about moving to Salem, not really thinking about how much I would miss Sweet Home, because I talked to my mom every day, and I talked to my aunt and my cousin and stuff. And so I never thought about the ramifications of moving to a town that I didn't know anyone in. But we were excited about it, and the kids, our kids were really excited about moving, even though, you know, they had grown up in the sweet home schools and stuff, and they loved that. I think we, as a family, were all really excited about the move. So it was a good thing.
It was.